Good morning, everyone. My name is Martin Feery, and today I would like to welcome you to the Federation of Philosophia. We will be going over the philosophies that founded Philosophia, as well as any unwanted ideas that were not a part of the formation of Philosophia's government or social fabric. And finally, we will go over Philosophia's lawmaking, justice, property rights, social contract, liberty, and equality. The philosophers whose ideas were integral in the foundation of Philosophia were Aristotle, John Locke, and John Stuart Mill. Aristotle's ideas on aristocracy and polity were key components in the formation of government, as well as John Locke's separation of powers, which is how Philosophia separated each individual branch from one another to make sure that no one individual branch could become too powerful. And then finally, John Stuart Mill's idea of individual liberty, utilitarianism, and community socialism were the key components of not the government's formation, but of Philosophia's social fabric. The unwanted ideas of Philosophia are any of those of Karl Marx. Now, we encourage everyone to read and to learn about Marxism within Philosophia, but we don't agree with the idea of collectivism trumping the individual's liberty, as well as the unified removal of the goods from the successful and by the envious are not tolerated. Above all, we disagree with the idea of equality of outcome. Okay, going into the lawmaking of Philosophia. So the society is governed by an aristocratic republic, and there is a constitution similar to the United States, but there is no Bill of Rights. And the reason why there is no Bill of Rights is because Philosophia does not think the government grants you rights and therefore has no role in enumerating rights in any document whatsoever. Instead, government's role is to protect your rights that you were already given by your birth and by your intrinsic human value as a human with the ability to reason. There are three separate branches, the first being the People's Council. The People's Council essentially is a legislature and is composed of council members. The council members are selected at random by a civil service number. So essentially, any person in society could be selected to be a council member every 4 years. It is a one unified house system with a series of representatives that are in each separate district, and the number of representatives in the council is determined by the size of a population. The People's Councils can write laws, impeach aristocrats, impeach judges, fund the military, police, border security, or any security measures necessary for Philosophia, as well as select one vital societal institution every 2 years. Vital societal institutions are essentially any component of society. So it could be the military, it could be healthcare, so on and so forth. And once that vital societal institution is selected, from there is where the aristocrats are elected to sit on the aristocracy. The People's Council exists for two main reasons. One, it is to encourage polity, because you as an individual would have a higher incentive to learn about government, to learn about your society, because at any time you could be randomly selected to sit on the People's Council. And not only that, but you also have the incentive to encourage your fellow man to become more knowledgeable in government because they could be sitting on the council. So overall, though Philosophia acknowledges that not every single individual can be virtuous at all times, the People's Council and the ability to be selected at random incentivizes you to be more virtuous and more knowledgeable about government. The second branch is the judiciary, with one supreme judiciary or Supreme Court. There is no judicial supremacy, as the judiciary's only purpose is to review the legality of any legal process. The reason there's no judicial supremacy is because you would essentially have a competing aristocracy. You'd have one aristocratic group in the aristocracy and one in the judiciary that would argue about the legality of certain things. Instead, the judiciary does not have the ability to deem something unconstitutional, but rather illegal. Finally, they can preside over recalls and impeachments. Judges serve a 15-year term, not a lifetime appointment, and they are nominated by the aristocracy but approved by the People's Council. And the final branch, which essentially serves as the executive branch, is the aristocracy. It is an 11-person council, and each individual aristocrat is re-elected every 6 years as long as their vital societal institution remains as one of the components for the People's Council. Every vital societal institution is subject to change, but there is 2 members per each institution. So say we choose healthcare because we're in some sort of health crisis, all the doctors in society would vote for their doctor or for whoever else. And once those individuals are selected by that specific sector of society, they are then put up for election from the general society, essentially just as an approval measure. There is one member or chief aristocrat that is selected by the People's Council and is not a part of any vital societal institution. They are simply there really to serve as a tiebreaker vote and as just somebody who's impartial to any of the societal institutions overall. They are not re-electable, and they will be selected every 6 years. Every other member is nominated by the People's Council by a simple majority and then democratically elected, as I said before. The aristocracy can approve laws and can dissolve rogue councils, and they can preside over the military and create aristocratic decrees, which are essentially executive orders. In Philosophia, there are four main components of justice. The first being that no individual's legal rights shall be infringed, for infringing on the individual harms the collective and, in fact, even the individual who is committing the infringement. By this, it essentially is saying that if somebody commits a crime and is allowed to get away with that crime, then they are incentivizing and even establishing a precedent that crime is okay within society. So in order to reduce any aspect or any idea that crime is considered okay, all laws must be enforced and protected by not only the government, by the individuals, but also the individuals within society. The second idea of justice is that no individual's intrinsic human value shall be infringed. Infringing on an individual's or a group of individuals' value discredits the fundamental principle of intrinsic human value. So what this means is that essentially, even if a law is put in place, if the law violates an intrinsic human value, or the idea that every person has their individual rights, then that is an unjust law. So this is more of the protection of the individual from an immoral law, essentially. So something like slavery violates their intrinsic human value. Owning a slave violates the intrinsic human value of the individual who is enslaved, and therefore is not truly just. The third is punishment for violations or compensation for being violated should be merited. Punishments and compensations should also be maintained and not falsely promised. This is simply saying that if somebody commits a crime, they are going to be sentenced to a crime, and if they are sentenced to the crime, they actually are forced to serve their sentencing. Fourth and finally is that justice is conducted by the society, therefore the collection of individuals, and for this reason an individual is treated equitably as any member of society to ensure consistent respect of individual liberty. Really what this is saying is that if everybody is not equal under the law, then the laws really are not applicable to everyone, and if they're not applicable to everyone, you're essentially violating intrinsic human value or not creating a just law, and therefore violating justice. Okay, property rights in philosophy are pretty straightforward. The government only exists to protect individual safety and ensure that individual rights are protected. Just like John Locke's idea of property being part of the individual, Philosophia agrees to the same thing. Though Aristotle was not against slaveholding, Philosophia believes that an individual is its own sovereign being, like I said before, and therefore another individual cannot be considered property, as I stated before, in justice as well. Government coercion is not mandated for the collectivization of property, but it is incentivized within the society of Philosophia, as it should be used to help the homeless, provide for the poor, feed the hungry, or even provide places of higher learning. It is incumbent upon society to provide for the other individuals, because you would want those people to also provide for you, especially if they're elected into government. Okay, now going into the social contract theory. So Philosophia is a hybrid between social contract theory and utilitarianism. The government overall is based on popular sovereignty and the idea that most of the power of the government resides in the populace. And therefore, it really goes into John Locke's theory of the social contract, and that we form the society together to protect individual human rights. However, having said that, the social end, or the social fabric of Philosophia, is highly based on utilitarianism and virtue. So essentially, a mixture of Mill's idea that society's goal overall should be for the fostering of the most good, but that each individual should um, find what's good in them based on virtue, education, and how to promote a good life. Society overall should be for the most good, or uh, the most happiness overall. But what determines happiness should not be exactly based on just utility, but also on the individual virtues and desires of the individual. So it's trying to maintain a balance between utilitarianism and Aristotelian virtue. Okay, now going into liberty. Liberty is pretty straightforward in Philosophia. It was a gift given upon man upon his birth, and that man maintains his own liberty based on his intrinsic human value, as I said before, and on his individual exceptionalism. It's man's ability to reason and to think of things such as of God and of government that makes him valuable, and therefore gives him natural rights. Government does not exist to give these rights, but to protect them and to protect liberty overall. The only line that is drawn is the one that Mill stated when he stated that basically you have liberty up until the point that you're violating somebody else's liberty. So you can wave your fist in the air as much as you want, but you can't hit somebody else, because then you violated their individual liberty. And then finally, equality. Individual equality is part of the natural state of man, but social equality is not. So what do I mean by individual equality? Well, the same thing as liberty. It's intrinsic to man's natural state. Everybody is born equal. If I take a baby from a rich person and a baby from a poor person and put them in a room, they're exactly equal. It's not until society forms that inequalities start forming. So individually, every person is equal, and that individual equality in philosophy is protected under the law. We are required individual equality is required to form a government and society, and necessary to maintain democratic governance. If somebody does not feel that they are equal in society, they are most likely not willing to participate in a democratic government. Now, social equality is not guaranteed. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if somebody is good at something and is better than the other person, they can succeed and climb the social ladder and become more wealthy and more prominent. But that does not trump any other person's individual equal rights under the law in Philosophia. Equal opportunity is highly encouraged through collectivism and socialism in the social setting outside of government, but it's not mandated by law. And non-government institutions that threaten equality are not socially acceptable, as well as any views on inequality. So ideas such as Nazism would not be considered socially acceptable within Philosophia. But they're not to be banned. Like I said before, all ideas are welcome in Philosophia to be debated, because one of the best ways to discredit a bad idea is to socially humiliate it. Equal outcome is a discouraged system socially, and is completely illegal to be attempted by the government. The government cannot choose winners and losers, or attempt to either suppress people from being the best individual they can, or artificially raise people from levels that they yet haven't attained for themselves. So that is Philosophia. Here are the sources that were used in developing the society. And with that, I would like to thank you for taking the tour of Philosophia. Thank you very much. Have a good day.